Okay, so we're diving deep today into something I think a lot of people maybe have thought about or tried
Yeah.
or maybe are even dealing with right now.
Huh.
It's that whole thing of starting a passion project, to bring in some extra cash, but it ends up kind of backfiring and costing you money.
Oh, yeah.
We're calling it Side Hustle Hell, and we're getting our insights from a fictional podcast called Hustle and Flow. When your passion project bankrupts,
Yeah.
you think of this deep dive like a survival guide, but with some seriously funny and relatable stories.
Yeah.
Our mission is to pull out those lessons that could save you from some financial headaches. If you're thinking about starting a side hustle, or even if you're already in the middle of one.
Exactly. And I think Hustle and Flow offers a really interesting perspective because of its hosts, Alex and Jamie.
Yeah.
Alex is, the more cautious one, always looking at the risks, the financial realities.
Right.
And then you've got Jamie, who's like super enthusiastic about entrepreneurship,
Uh-huh.
sometimes maybe a little too enthusiastic, learns from some pretty memorable experiences.
Oh, I bet.
But they share their own stories. And what's great for us is they also bring in stories and takeaways from their listeners.
Yeah, those real life experiences, or fictional real life experiences are so valuable.
Totally.
And they do a good job of laying out what side hustle hell actually is.
Right.
Jamie jokes that it's like Etsy shop, tax evasion,
Yeah, classic Jamie.
which is funny, but it kind of hints at how things can get messy.
Definitely.
But Alex brings it back down to earth and says, it's when that project that's supposed to make you money starts costing you everything.
Right. So it's not just about not making a profit. It's about actively losing money and resources.
And time and energy.
Oh, absolutely.
It's that point where the excitement you had at the beginning meets the reality of like bills piling up.
Yeah. And what's interesting is how quickly that initial excitement can overshadow practical considerations.
Totally.
Like you get so caught up in the idea that you don't stop to think, is this actually going to work?
Yeah, is anyone actually going to buy this?
Exactly. And Hustle and Flow has some great examples.
Oh, yeah, like what?
Well, there's this one where Jamie tries to sell glow-in-the-dark bonsai trees.
Oh my God.
It was literally just plastic plants with dollar store glow sticks.
That's amazing.
Right. But it makes you think, is there really a demand for this?
And is it even feasible?
Totally.
Like, could you actually make a profit selling those?
Probably not.
So it's that gap between a cool idea and something people will pay money for.
Exactly.
And to really hammer home how risky side hustles can be, they mentioned that something like 60% of them fail within the first year.
Yeah, that's a pretty scary statistic.
It is. It makes you wonder, what are the reasons behind that?
Right. It can't just be bad luck.
Exactly. There have to be some common factors.
For sure.
And one of those factors is illustrated perfectly by a story from one of the Hustle and Flow listeners.
Oh, tell me about this.
This person spent $8,000 on supplies to make handmade soap,
You okay?
but they ended up making soap that looked like cheese.
$8,000 on cheese soap.
Yeah, and apparently their garage smelled like a French dairy explosion.
Oh, wow.
It's a funny story, but the advice Jamie gives is spot on.
What's that?
Don't quit your day job until you've sold more than 3 bars of brie soap.
Uh-huh. I love that.
It's basically saying test the waters before you go all in.
Yeah, you don't want to sink all your savings into something that might not work.
All right, so we've talked about what side hustle hell is, and we've seen some examples of how it can happen.
Right.
But what are some of the key things that really define it?
Yeah, it's more than just not making money.
Exactly. So what does it look like when a side hustle starts to go south?
Well, I think it's when the side hustle starts to have a negative impact on your life overall.
Yeah.
It's not just about the money, it's about the time you're putting in.
Right.
It's about the emotional toll.
Mm-hmm.
And it's definitely about the strain it puts on your finances.
Yeah, and that can affect every other area of your life.
Exactly. It's like this growing gap between the dream you had and the reality of what's happening.
And Hustle and Flow does a good job of pointing out some red flags.
Yeah, those warning signs that things might be heading in the wrong direction.
One that really stood out was the danger of scaling up too quickly.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
They had this bit where Jamie is pretending to be a candle maker called Wax Poetic,
Okay.
and after selling only 20 candles, decides to rent a warehouse.
Wow, talk about jumping the gun.
Right. It seems crazy, but it shows how tempting it can be.
Oh, yeah. You get a little bit of success and you think, I need to go big or go home.
But that can be a huge mistake.
It can be disastrous.
So what might make someone think that scaling up so fast is a good idea?
Well, I think it's partly that initial positive feedback, even if it's just from a few people.
Yeah, you get excited.
You think, oh, this is going to be huge,
Right, and you see all these success stories online.
especially on social media,
It's like everyone's making millions from their side hustles.
that they probably aren't.
Yeah, and Hustle and Flow calls out the influence of unreliable sources.
Like those Instagram gurus who are always promising overnight riches.
Right, and they even have a fictional one called @CryptoTaco
Oh, yeah, I remember that one.
It's so easy to get caught up in that hype and make decisions that aren't financially sound.
Totally. And there's also the fear of missing out.
FOMO.
Yeah, you see everyone else supposedly doing so well, and you don't want to be left behind.
And then sometimes the idea itself just isn't viable.
Right. It sounds good in theory, but it doesn't translate to the real world.
Like Jamie's idea for scented candles for cats.
Oh, yeah, that's a classic.
It's funny, but it makes you think.
Yeah. Did your research know your target audience?
Because cats don't really care about scented candles.
Not really, and their sense of smell is way more sensitive than ours.
So a strong scent could actually be unpleasant for them.
Exactly.
So we've talked about the warning signs now. What about the advice?
Right, how can people avoid falling into side hustle hell?
What does Hustle and Flow suggest?
Well, they have some really practical tips.
Okay, like what?
First up, meticulous budgeting.
Ugh, budgeting.
I know it's not the most exciting thing.
But it's so important.
It is. It's crucial.
And they emphasize separating your personal finances from your side hustle finances.
Yeah. Keep those separate for the beginning.
Yeah.
So you can track everything,
Every expense, every bit of income.
because that gives you a clear picture of how your side hustle is actually doing.
And it helps you avoid overspending,
Which is so easy to do.
especially when you're starting out.
And they warn against overspending on things like aesthetic packaging,
Oh yeah, you can get so caught up in making things look pretty.
especially for social media.
But if your product isn't selling, the fanciest packaging won't save you.
So true.
Focus on what actually brings in customers.
Another key piece of advice is knowing when to stop.
Oh yeah, that's a tough one.
It is, but sometimes you have to admit that an idea isn't working.
And cut your losses.
They use the example of a crochet YouTube channel with only 12 subscribers.
And they're all aunts.
Right. It's funny,
Yeah.
but it makes a point. If you're not getting traction, don't keep pouring money into it.
Especially don't take out loans.
Yeah, that can lead to serious financial problems.
So be honest with yourself, look at the numbers.
And be willing to walk away if you need to.
And their third piece of advice is to get help.
Don't be afraid to ask for advice.
They suggest talking to accountants or even knowledgeable friends or mentors,
Yeah, sometimes an outside perspective can be really helpful.
because you might not see the blind spots in your own business.
Exactly. And they have this great quote from their fictional financial advisor, Dana Lee.
Oh, what does Dana say?
Passion is great, but passion plus a spreadsheet is better.
I like that.
If you're losing money for 6 months straight, pause and pivot.
That's such good advice.
It is. It's about using data to make decisions and being willing to change course if things aren't working.
So it's not all doom and gloom.
No, Hustle and Flow also shares some success stories,
Oh, good, because I was starting to get worried.
but they present them realistically.
Yeah, they're not like get-rich-quick schemes.
No, they're about people who worked hard and were smart about their businesses.
Like their listener, Maria.
Yeah.
She had a vegan bakery that wasn't doing well.
Right.
So she pivoted and started a How to Bake TikTok channel.
And it took off.
Yeah, she found a way to share her passion and make money without a lot of overhead.
Exactly. She used a free platform to test her idea before investing more money.
And then there's Dave.
Okay, Dave, with the customizable pet rocks.
I love that story.
That's so quirky.
Yeah, he eventually rebranded as a mental health guru with stress relief rocks.
And found success.
It shows that you have to be adaptable,
And sometimes a little bit lucky.
but you also have to be willing to try new things.
Yeah, don't be afraid to experiment.
Now, they also have a listener Q&A section,
Oh, yeah.
which I think covers some common concerns.
Like what?
Well, someone asked if they should sell their car to fund an underwater basket weaving startup.
Really?
Yeah, and the answer was a resounding no.
Which is probably for the best.
It shows how important it is to not risk essential assets on risky ventures.
Yeah, your car is pretty essential.
For most people, yeah.
So don't gamble with things you need.
Another question was about making very little money from a side hustle,
Okay.
like $5 from selling pottery,
Mm-hmm.
and they wanted to know if they still had to pay taxes.
And the answer is?
Yes, generally speaking, you do.
Even on small amounts.
Jamie jokes that the IRS doesn't accept exposure as currency.
Right. They want their cut.
So no matter how small your earnings, you need to understand your tax obligations.
And maybe talk to a tax professional if you're not sure.
All right, so as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the main takeaway for our listeners?
I think it's about finding that balance between passion and planning.
Yeah, you knew both.
Your enthusiasm is great, but you need to be realistic.
Uh-huh.
You need to understand your market,
You need budget carefully.
and you need to be willing to assess your idea objectively.
Because if you're not careful, that passion can lead to financial trouble.
As Hustle and Flow puts it, passion plus planning equals profit.
But passion plus panic equals pawning your TV.
Exactly. So keep that in mind.
And in their fictional outro, they thank their listeners.
Right.
Give a shout out to their social media at Hustle and Flow Pod
Uh-huh.
and tease their next episode.
What's it about?
Influencer Island, surviving a brand trip gone wrong.
Oh, wow. Sounds intense.
It does, but for our listeners, the key takeaway is to constantly evaluate that balance.
Between excitement and financial smarts.
Be ready to adapt to change.
And know when to pivot or even walk away.
Keep those spreadsheets handy.
And hopefully your passions will lead to profit, not to having to sell your belongings.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into side hustle hell.
And good luck with your own ventures.
See you next time.
Bye.